all you literary legends and luminaries. I'm Julie and welcome to another episode of Booksmart. Today's episode is a memoir, kind of. It's called The Fruit Cure, the story of extreme wellness turned sour by Jacqueline Alnes. I'm not into wellness books. I think they are all fads and trends that prey on our insecurities, whose ultimate goal is to make money, not to make people feel healthier or feel better about themselves. My idea of exercising is dancing around my house, vigorously cleaning and organizing, shopping, and walking the dog. I turned my desk in my home office into a stand-up one, so I avoid sitting so much during the day. My eating habits are not great, and I suffer from a horrible sweet tooth. While I'm responsible for killing lots of turkeys with all the turkey sandwiches I eat, I don't eat much meat. I take 0 supplements and do not belong to any gym. I have no idea if that makes me healthier or more out of shape than the average person. But bananas are my favorite fruit, and I love banana bread, and I adore banana bars with my homemade cream cheese frosting. So the fruit cure interested me as it appeared to question such health fads. Because I hadn't read too many health-related books, I thought I would give it a shot. It did not live up to my expectations. But first, let me talk about Jacqueline Allen's experiences, the memoir portion of her book. Alnes is an avid runner, an activity I've never understood unless there's a serial killer after you. I love walking, but I guess you would need to own at least one pair of tennis shoes for running, which I do not. Alnes does a beautiful job, though, in describing what running means to her, how she feels when she runs, and then she falls after feeling ill. Doctors can't exactly find out what is wrong with her, and it's incredibly relatable when she writes of her confusion and frustration, almost like her doctors, her coaches, her teammates all think she's making it up. I think we've all been there before. Before we can even really get into her own story, though, Alnes begins telling the story of Essie Honeyball, a South African athlete in 1954 who suddenly fell ill. This is where Alnes loses me. I do not agree with her narrative choices. I was expecting this to be a memoir with Alnes' experiences with the fruit cure, but at least half the book, if not more, is Essie's story, which eventually leads to the people who created 30 Bananas a Day, Harley Johnstone and Leanne Radcliffe, more commonly known as Durian Ryder and Freely. While Alnes seeks out online assistance to explain why she can't run anymore, she stumbles upon the online community that raves over 30 bananas a day. But Alnes herself doesn't really become a diehard fruit cure person. She dabbles in it, but does not go to the extremes, nor does she partake in their in-person gatherings. Instead, the reader gets tedious descriptions of the videos Freely and Durian Ryder post online, especially what Freely is wearing, usually something skimpy and revealing, and what is said on these videos. Alnes always includes several of the posts and replies throughout these passages, which gets irritating to read. I feel much of this could have been cut, especially when Alnes describes these videos again and again. Then the 30 bananas a day leads into the raw till 4 group, blah, blah, blah. Now, don't get me wrong. Alnes' own experiences are incredibly compelling. As her symptoms increase in severity to the point where she repeats words over and over again and doesn't have much control over her body movements at times, her supposed friends and teammates take advantage of her, posting videos of her that mock her. It's heartbreaking. When she shows one of the videos to her doctors, they finally take her seriously. They think she has some form of epilepsy, but her MRI doesn't show anything in her brain to indicate anything certain. She's even sexually assaulted by a supposed friend during one of her seizures. Alnes gets a wheelchair-like chair, but she cannot move it herself. She spends much of a college semester confined to her room alone while her roommates live their lives, which is when she seeks out an online community and finds the Banana Cure group. Let me read you a passage that is actually towards the end of the book, but it describes the lure of these online communities, those that promise you'll look better and feel better if you just succumb to the strict guidelines that they lay out for you. So here's what she says. From where I sat thousands of miles away watching, it did look like the best of times. It looked full of color and laughter and fresh fruit and trim bodies and bikinis. It looked like the opposite of my life. In Portland, I felt perpetually frantic, like a rat trying to escape a cage. I did not understand yet that I was the cage. The months I'd spent lying in counseling, years spent avoiding counseling, and otherwise not dealing with the loss of the cross-country team, my teammate pressing his weight down onto me, the echoes of former friends' cruelty and the way that a non-diagnosis left me in a convoluted limbo with myself, all of it meant that I feared what my body would do in any given situation and also what others might do to me. I had a recurring nightmare that started after I got sick and stayed with me for years. It's maybe a better way of saying how I felt than I could ever admit otherwise. And then she goes on to describe this nightmare. These health fads are enticing and have a cultish feel about them with their you must do this, and if you don't, that's why you're unhealthy and look like crap. That the failure is not a result of the program or the organization's rules. It's all on you. This is the aspect of the book that I think Alnes captures well, how vulnerable people are drawn to online health influencers and at that point will try anything to feel better, especially when doctors have only made them feel as though they might be crazy and it's all in their heads. Because eating just fruit doesn't sound that hard, right? Within the fruit cure, Alnes brings up several excellent ideas, but they're not fully developed, nor do they receive the development they should. For instance, Alnes describes the similarities between formal organized religion and veganism, the moralistic side of such lifestyles. And here's how she kind of compares the two. And this is pretty early on in her book. It was the same lack of certitude that had led me to fall away from formal religion after a lifetime of being brought up in the church. There was just something in me that had a hard time condensing the messiness of the world into a pinprick of something tangible I could trust. It wasn't that I didn't want to believe. In fact, I very much did. I wanted to belong to something greater than myself, to lose myself to the current of what I knew was right. One of the parallels between organized religion and veganism, at least in my experience, is that a believer in either has a tendency to think that their way of life is best on a level of morality. To not believe in God or veganism means that you need saving or need to wake up to the harsh realities of what your life without belief is costing you. I wanted to be all in. I craved the safety of knowing definitively that I was good, but I had too many questions. How was locally raised meat bad, but fruit flown all the way across the world and better on an environmental level? What about people who couldn't access all the substitutes and specialty ingredients that we bought at the co-op each week? I liked the freedom of eating a mostly vegan diet in college while still leaving room for spontaneity cravings or special moments with family. I wasn't against any diet, but I wasn't for any diet either, which I guess made me just curious enough. And that's how she kind of gets into those online communities. But that's what we all want, right? Alnes also writes about the paradox of vegans concerned about the well-being of animals, but then attacking humans who don't agree with them. The violence that some of these supposedly peaceful vegans purport doesn't match their overall actions. Durian Ryder himself is a ranting, violent, sexist man, and even Alnes admits that she finds him off-putting at times, yet still went along with his ideas of health and wellness, which is interesting how oblivious we can be or how we simply use the stuff that agrees with us and ignores the rest. She also shows the shortcomings of all these health fads, that they still idealize the thinness and whiteness, not embracing all types of bodies and colors. Another idea she describes is the lack of accessibility of some of these fruit or vegan fads, how not everyone has easy access to such foods. But it just doesn't come together for me as a whole. Alden's own story, I'm not sure I completely understand because there is so much more focus on her research and other people's stories. She spends so much space on Durian Ryder and Freely's post at the expense of her own story. Alden's has so many good ideas within her book, but her narrative choices just didn't work for me. I got bored with the tedious background information, and if I wanted to read online posts and replies, I would do so, but I chose to read a book instead. The book is more of an investigative book into Durian Ryder and Freely. She even tells us that she reached out to them for interviews, but they declined. Within her investigation, she throws in her own personal experiences, like what led her to such a fad in the first place and how easily it influenced her. I would have preferred more memoir aspects and less research. The research writing was boring and the information gets repetitive. However, her own story is very compelling and it's too bad she didn't focus on that aspect of her book. Even though I didn't love the book, if you are someone who follows online food trends or health trends or seems to place your self-esteem in the hands of online communities who may not have your best interest at heart, you should read The Fruit Cure. You won't lose much if you skip over all the parts about Essie. This was a topic I didn't know much about, yet ironically my assumptions that such trends are designed more for the influencer to grow his or her brand as opposed to altruism or spreading joy and happiness in the world was correct. that the whole concept of a well-balanced meal and eating in moderation is always a viable option. Yet I still learned some fascinating information from the book, and for me, that made it worth the read. Now go eat a banana, but one will suffice, and make sure you eat more than just bananas. Thanks for watching. My goal at Booksmart is to get a little bit smarter, one book at a time.